Hello, everyone. Well, before we get on to everybody losing their jobs, perhaps I can introduce Thomas Wolf, who is the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of Hugging Face. And we're here to talk about open source. And at the moment, there's a huge battle between proprietary models, open source models. The leading labs are fighting to become the front runner in AI. But at the moment, if open source can succeed, it means that we might have an abundance of choice, a democratization of AI, and perhaps something different from what we've had with the internet over the past decade, where a handful of companies are leading here. So I'm really excited to talk about all of this with you, Thomas. But let's just start with Hugging Face and a bit about Hugging Face's origins, because you kind of stumbled into open source, right? That wasn't the ambition to begin with.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. First, let me say how happy I'm here, how happy I am to start this next web. I think it's a really great conference. I think also how happy I am that open source is maybe one of the first things you're going to hear about. It's very close to my heart. It was, like you said, Christina, it was not at all how Hugging Face started. We started as a game company. We were trying to build this modern version of, some of you might know, the Tamagotchi in the 90s, which were these kind of electronic virtual animals that you had to keep alive and to keep happy. And so in the beginning of, I think 2017, you started to have some good vision models. You started to have this model that could identify objects, right? That was the rise of big data. We were talking about surveillance a lot at this time. And so we thought this model that can actually process image would be great to be able to make companion that could see what you see, and you could send a selfie, and it could tell you about the objects that are around you. So we started to build this. The vision technology was there. The text processing technology was not at all there in 2017. We even had, in the beginning, we had a full-time comedian, a guy from New York, a very, very good comedian, at least trying to get well known, who was just writing dialogues for our things because the text processing were so bad. And so while we were doing that, I was starting to research basically what you could do with the first models there. So for the scientists here, it was called the LSTM or the RNN, which was not exactly the technology we have right now. And I open sourced some of the code we had. And this just blew up overnight. It was in December, I remember, and during one conference, rainy day in Brussels, and the day after we had like 10,000 stars, or like 1,000 at this time, but it quickly grew with a couple of viral releases. It quickly grew to a huge community. And so after a few months, we had this choice between the game that we were trying to make work, but the tech didn't really work, and it was really tough to push, and we had this open source repository that kind of became very well known in the AI research community, and every researcher started to use it, and then the hobbyists started to use this repository. And so when we were supposed to raise our Series A, we decided, let's go back to the seed investor, and let's convince them that the game is not the future, but open source is the future. So that was a tough sell, but we managed to do it.
How much harder was that to sell than a cute Tamagotchi-style game?
To the investor?
Yeah.
I mean, we were lucky that our first investor were people who joined with the idea that we already said we don't want to monetize too early. We want to build a huge community around this game. And so we just convinced them this huge community wouldn't be a gamer community, but an open source software developer community. So they was like, OK, it's the same.
And there is this ginormous open source community right now, and its goodwill really helps the whole ecosystem to thrive, as well as grants. But at the same time, you're seeing unprecedented levels of venture capital investment going into these private companies. Several fundraisers a year for some of these companies, $40 billion in one fundraise. I mean, how can Hugging Face and I guess open source developers really compete with the huge amounts of capital going into some of these AI labs?
Yeah, I think it's open source. It's an interesting story actually how this evolved. Open source it's hard to really pinpoint. What is your typical open source team? So one example. So I was telling how we started open source. At first, our library was mostly used during the weekend. It was like the playing, tinkering, hobby things. So we had the downloads would spike on Saturday and Sunday, and everyone would be using Hugging Face. And then during the week, they would go back to their non-AI job at that time. We're talking 2019, 2020, and just download would fall, and people would just work on their old like Excel sheets or whatever they do, right? And with time, we saw how this moved from a purely, hobby type of thing or AI research kind of niche to basically having constant download during the whole week. And now when we do survey and we ask, do you use that for work or for side project or hobby, people usually say both, actually. And so the open source community is basically this mix of like very small team, hobbyists, people who don't really have a lot of money as AI researcher in academia lab. And then you have also this very large open source company. So of course, there is Meta, who is on the news right now, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But also Mistral in Europe. Now in China, you have DeepSeek. And maybe what is surprising is we keep hearing this idea that you need a lot of capital to invest to train a model, but we still see this open source model competing at the highest level. I think that was maybe one of the biggest discovery of 2025 in January, if you remember, which feel like years ago in AI time, but that was just 5 months ago. We had this DeepSeek model, and I often call that the ChatGPT moment for open source AI, because the whole world outside of just AI specialists discovered that there was something as open source AI. Even my mother was like, oh, you're in the news, like DeepSeek's open source AI. And so I think people started to understand that there is actually a few ways you can use these models. So you can access them through ChatGPT or Anthropic or Google, which is, I think, something that a lot of people now know. I would guess I don't even need to do a pooling, but I guess everyone here has been using ChatGPT. If not, it's really the last moment. You should do it today, right? You have to join this. But people discovered also that you have another way you can use model. You can actually download them and you can use them yourself on your own laptop. You don't have to go through the server of OpenAI or Gemini or Anthropic, basically. So I think it's a very positive thing. And these models are pretty much the same level of performance. So we still need to figure out, I think that's still an open question for this year, which is how much can you get an open source model? How good can it be? Can it still compete with the highest level of the closed source model with only, the limited resource that people put in? So it's still a couple of $1 million. Training DeepSeek is said to have cost around $5 to $6 million. There is some question, but it's pretty sure this number is not maybe a 1 order of magnitude off, but not more than that. It's not $1 billion, right? And it's still at the OpenAI level. So you see this type of announcement, like Chinese and Mistral competing, and then on the other side you see OpenAI saying we put $500 billion in Stargate. I think for the people that don't really know the tech, it's really hard to know how to reconcile these two very different order of magnitudes. And one way you can see that is it costs a lot to open the new doors of research, and it costs a lot less to follow the path of the leader. So I think there's something we have to really be grateful to OpenAI is how much they're willing to raise and to put in exploring what is the next thing that can keep improving the performance of this model, knowing that just after, basically everyone will copy that in a matter of weeks, right? So they had O1 in November, the first reasoning model. I think 10 days after, we had the first DeepSeek reasoning. So obviously, it was probably a bit co-developed because it's just not possible to catch up in 10 days. But now, this year, all the big models are reasoning. Now we're getting used to have a model that say, oh, I'm going to think about your question, what about that, and maybe that, and I don't know, and I'm going to double check, and we wait, and then at the end, we have an answer that's actually much better than what we used to have last year, so we're happy about that. So this costs a lot less, which is quite nice, I think, for us, because it means, in general, what it means is just the cost of this model, because they can be kind of easily copied in a way, the cost of this model will keep going down.
Yeah, so you're jumping on the coattails of OpenAI.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that's going on here is this huge battle for talent. You mentioned Meta, which has just done an acqui-hire within Scale AI for $15 billion, mainly to hire its chief executive, Alex Wang, but also to try and attract more talent. It's apparently been offering sign-on bonuses of $100 million to AI talent, and I'm hearing salaries in the range of sort of 7 figures. This is an insane amount. How will open source fare with a lot of talent being attracted by these big salaries? Or maybe they won't be.
I think it's fine. Maybe the one thing I would like to, if you can take one takeaway, is open source is not incompatible with making money. So we are cash flow positive at Hugging Face. The last fundraise we had was 2 years ago. We have not even started to use this money. But you can, and there is like a lot of great success stories already of companies who build a very nice open source framework. One example is Databricks, another is MongoDB. Older, you have Red Hat, but it's becoming a common pattern. Basically, you open source a very nice library that people can use, and around that you build kind of it's called the open core model. You build like a fully fledged enterprise suite that basically have all the additional feature around security, around maybe observability that actually a real company needs. I think it's kind of a win-win model because it will be very easy to try your model. It's very easy to go to Hugging Face to download the model and to run it. It's like free, it's very easy. But once you scale it, once they want to build a business around it, they also naturally will come to you to have like a couple of more serious features you need when you scale your business. And so, for instance, Mistral is maybe one of the great latest examples where they really start with this kind of core open source model approach, and they still open source model every now and then. And Magistral, just last week, was the latest model that they open source. And around this, they have their consulting offering and their like integration offering, which I think is very nice. Now, you definitely, like you were saying, like the rise of compensation and how much people can ask in the field, how much is definitely a challenge. We saw that for us. So we started as a fully US company. Hugging Face was really founded in New York. For a long time, I was the only one in Europe. And then progressively, we built like a very strong European presence. And there is two main reasons. The first is the talents are really great here. We know how to source them. We know the good schools, so it's very easy to find them. But the second reason is also for the typical price of one software engineer in Europe. You know, you can have if you take one software engineer in the Bay Area right now, you can have 3 to 4 people of roughly the same level in Europe, and they're actually well paid even there. So this kind of really crazy, rise of compensation in the Bay Area has kind of pushed us to Europe. And what we see right now is it's becoming also competitive in Europe. So, for instance, I had a couple of people in my team who left to go to found the recent startup in France, Mistral, H company was another one, Poolside. There was a couple of startups that raised a very big seed round. And so naturally, when they offer like 2 to 3 times the salary you're giving someone, you have to say, I understand people just move, yeah. I think it's fine that people move around labs. I think it can also diffuse all the knowledge around training this model, which is a good thing for the ecosystem. If everyone who knew how to train this model was in just one single company, that would be really like very hard to see this widespread adoption and this widespread creation of startup. But it's also really, I think, the question is a bit how sustainable this is, right? How many people, talking about Meta, how many people can you pay 100 million per year and still earn enough revenue to actually make this balance sheet positive in the end? So I think we are probably a little bit in a maybe like a skill bubble time. Hopefully this will go to maybe more reasonable state of affair.
And I guess for startups or people who are thinking of founding a startup, there's that question of whether actually joining one of the big tech companies might be more worthwhile.
It is a big question, right? Because if you can earn 100 million, I mean, this number has probably to be taken with a grain of salt, but if you can earn definitely several tens million, and that's a number I've definitely seen around, in compensation, why would you start a startup, right? Because in many cases, this is kind of a pretty good outcome of an entrepreneurial journey, is you have like a couple $10 million when you get acquired. And here you combine the safety of a big tech, the name also of having like Meta or Google on your CV, and the same level of compensation. And I think this is probably quite bad for the ecosystem because in general, we would love to have the wider possible ecosystem of startup, including here, I think, in Amsterdam.
So what do you think is the sweet spot then? You know, if you're building on open source, you're probably not going to be able to invest enough to make these research breakthroughs, but you'll be able to match performance, hopefully not too far behind them. So where's the sweet spot? What should entrepreneurs be thinking of as something which would be successful?
Yeah. So the way I see that, in particular when I do angel investment, for instance, is there is 3 main layers. The first layer is like the really low level, like chips and maybe low level platform development. I think this layer is very interesting nowadays to explore. Also here, obviously, I mean, the Netherlands is mostly known in AI for ASML, but that's a great example. And I think there's a lot of things you can still really do if you want to dive in the low level. There is a lot of optimization. A lot of people say, in the end, the price of intelligence will converge to the price of electricity, naturally. And so you want this to be as close as possible to electricity. So each electron that goes should be useful for an AI computation. And that's not at all what we have right now in GPUs. So this very low level is, I think, super interesting. There's a lot of interesting things happening there. You have the mid layer, which is training these foundation models, which I think is not super exciting as an entrepreneur right now. There's a lot of competition. It's very high, capital intensive. It's very hard to hire the people. So you kind of combine all the difficulties in this layer, which is train the models from scratch. And you have competition from everywhere in the world. And the last layer is the app layer. So you take this model as a granted, and you try to make a nice interface with human. And I think here there is a lot of value that can be created by basically understanding what your humans. Most of the time, people don't really want to chat exactly with a chatbot. They want this integrated in some of their tools. They want this integrated in how they do their workflow flow, or daily life workflow. And so thinking about the user experience of AI, what people would want to do, I think is something that both super interesting, I think, as a research or like development thing. It's also very accessible because you start from using this model, open source, closed source, you choose whatever you want. And most people actually switch regularly between a lot of models. And also it's something that you can do very well in Europe, I think. So most of the recent success stories I've seen are at this level. And if you want my advice, the best thing to do at this level is you take a very old field that has not changed a lot in the past 10 years, and you try to see how you could totally change this with AI. So supply chain, compliancy, accountants, all of these things, you can, I think, reinvent them with an AI-first approach. And that's both very interesting, and I think there's a lot of potential for value creation there.
I'm going to pivot slightly to robots, not the kind that are going to make us extinct, but I know that it's an area that you're really excited in. Hugging Face is working hard on making robots more affordable and more customizable. So tell me a little bit about how soon you think we're going to have robots that are materially different to what's already out there.
Very soon. I often joke, I think next year we're going to have robots everywhere. I think it's mostly a societal thing, but maybe I can tell a little bit about why Hugging Face is doing robots. It's starting, I think, roughly 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where I saw 2 things happening. The first was a series of breakthrough in the robots research lab, Stanford, Berkeley, Oxford, CMU, where basically they started to show in the lab things that I thought was not at all possible. So challenging things where robots are, for instance, folding clothes, because clothes are like just this very weird type of material. Or like cooking, like throwing a panecook in the air and having it turn around, these type of things. Very fast type of motion, also very generalizable motion. At the same time, what we saw was a series of startups appearing. Figure in Europe, 1X. Tesla decided to start this Optimus type of robots. But all of these endeavors were all closed source. Nobody was talking about making open source. So it was quite clear we were heading to a future where you maybe have these robots, but they will be like black box. You would not be able to understand anything about them. And personally, I don't really like that. I found this a bit scary in a way. Like, if I have a robot, I would love to be able to understand how it's made, even tweak it, maybe change some part, or even build it myself, like a Lego. I think that's where I can really start to trust robots. And so that's when we decided to start to work on robots. So I had Remy, who was leading a part of Optimus at Tesla, who called me one day and said, I'm a bit tired of being a direct report of Elon. I would like to maybe have a more like normal sort of life where I don't need to be crazy stressed every weekend because I have my Monday meeting where I should present everything about Optimus to Elon. And so I said, yeah, you can come and let's try to see if there is like a community for open source robots. And so we started that 16 months ago. And this blew up, like this community grew like crazy. Just last weekend, like 4 days ago, we had a worldwide hackathon. We said we invited everyone to join. We had 3,000 people joining. 101 physical location, covering 5 continents. We had all the continents filled. Just Antarctica and Greenland had no robots things happening, but I think next time they're going to be in it probably. And we had like so much energy around this. And this is just a matter of 1 year, basically, this thing has been boomed. And the few things we needed to do for that was first make very cheap robots accessible. So we started to develop a very simple robot arm you can put here. It costs $100, so it's very inexpensive. And we made it open source so that people could tweak it, could plug it to their own use case. And what we started to see is a lot of people started to create small teams or startups around using this type of arm to put things in package, to fold clothes, to pick up things around. So basically, all this community has been growing to the point that a couple of months ago, I was like, we need to double down on this. So we acquired a robotics company called Pollen, who is maybe one of the only open source hardware robotics company in the world. There's maybe 2 of them. And Pollen was someone we worked a lot with, and we had a lot of like affinity in terms of thinking that we want something open, we want to build a full community around this technology. And so basically, when at some point they were like, OK, we need to raise our next fund, I was like, maybe you just need to join Hugging Face instead, and you won't even have to worry about raising funds. So that's basically what happened. And so the next stage for us will be try to push this more, so try to have more and more type of robots, still in the very accessible, low price point, and try to see if people, just like we saw in software, giving a platform to people, enable them to kind of grow their own business on top of this. We would like to see the same happening in robotics, giving basically the basic platform to see basically everyone start to create their own type of robots and to put them a bit everywhere.
Fascinating. OK, well, I'm off to buy a robotic arm to do my laundry for me. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to Thomas for giving us such good answers. Bye.
Thanks,